So I don't. Again, I think like we've talked about Tate. There's tons of information for you guys out there if you want to take a look at it more. What this show is actually going to be about, for the most part, is first off what the effect of this on G2 is going to be or should be, as well as the broader topic of, frankly, misogyny within the esports industry, because the core factor of why this got so big was the accusations, the discussion, I should say, about misogyny that was happening as a result of this guy appearing in Carlos's video, the potential effect of Carlos kind of providing this guy, putting this video of him out into the esports world, and then how a lot of this has been, I feel like, is used to distract from kind of core and continuing issues of potential misogyny that exist within the industry that I think are much more real and tangible and systemic within the industry, not some guy being on a video from outside the industry and then being inserted in here kind of randomly and arbitrarily, at least is like.
That needs to be said though, Monty. Think about this, right? The way the reaction was as if like they'd announced this guy was like co-CEO of G2 or something. Like what happened was Carlos is at some sort of a party now. No one even knows what that situation was. Presumably he's in Dubai or something with those guys. I think that's where they're all at. They're having some party. No one even knows until Carlos does the follow-up tweet that apparently they're friends or whatever, because it's implied when he's saying about I won't police my friends. What happens is Carlos posts a picture of him stood there. By the way, he's barely even in the fucking shot. It's merely the other two guys lifting the bottles up, doing like a champagne bottle raise to show that they're balling and swagging out and all that crap. And when he does this, then that's the post. When he does that post on its own, that is just classic Carlos, by the way. You've pushed the line, you've been a little bit edgy, because you're Carlos and you maybe have the fuck you when you went a little bit over the line, and now what you're seeing is, what's the pushback? Will people take it that I'm just being cheeky and doing a wink like this guy's banned off the internet? I probably should be doing this, but then again, I'm G2, so don't we kind of do what the fuck? If there was a bit of that mixed in there, the problem is this. Then the public response itself was very weird, because the public response, I actually thought one of the first tweets, which was someone who works for Misfits, who used to work for Riot, if they know them, Becca, I can't remember his surname, but it's Quickshot's wife, basically. There you go, Henry, of course, right? She actually, I thought it had the most legit tweet of all, because the way she phrased it looked very careful. She basically phrased it as like, she didn't say like, get Carlos out, or like, fuck G2, or like, what they're doing, like, they're tossing up with human chat. She didn't do that. She just basically said, like, to other organizations and people, like, let's not let this guy into esports. No, it's that. Let's not let him into esports. Now, that was the thing I couldn't handle. Is that, by the way, that's a totally valid opinion, if that's what she thinks of the person. I think as someone who's a veteran in the industry, worked for many important companies, it's a totally legit thing to put out there among your circle of group, like the people who follow you on Twitter. She didn't attack Carlos, say like, this means he's done X, Y, and Z that's conflated with this person. And crucially, let's just be real, as far as we know, aside from that video, Andrew Tate has shown no indications he is coming into esports. He isn't announcing a venture in esports. There isn't like an esports division of the multi-market thing you're talking about. He hasn't said any. I don't think he's ever mentioned esports. The joke is, by the way,
he knew he was in that video. Right?
I don't know. The thing is, in that, oh yeah, by the way, you think loads of like entrepreneur people aren't just hitting this guy up all the time for a photo or a selfie if they're in the same circles, etc. And also, I'll throw this out there. If you've ever watched any of his videos, I imagine he would despise esports. He's a sort of person who is like into kickboxing and real life stuff and thinks that like video games are a waste of your life and you're a moron if you play them. You're just wasting your time when you could be grinding and hustling and making all that dough. So I don't even, as far as I know that there's any indication he's ever coming in. I also don't know through what method would he enter esports. Basically, unless you're at the level of Carlos where you're willing to be edgy like that because you think you can get away with it, no one else has even shown any indications they're welcoming in. Hasn't come on any shows. He hasn't tweeted about esports. So the key thing is, first of all, I think that's already a sort of a bit of a sky is falling type scenario that isn't really a concern. Like, I don't think this person has any entry point to esports. And if anything, this weekend showed it. There is zero entry points, no matter almost how powerful or how much influence you have in the space. And then just as a quick aside, I'm sorry, as much as people love to bring up those quotes, which humans said, not like God himself, like, the 5 people you surround yourself with are the aggregate of who you are. Like, that's someone that was in one video with Carlos ever. Yes, Carlos made a follow-up tweet, which was an abstract tweet about you cannot police his friends. If you know Carlos, he is actually an incredibly fair-minded person. He's the sort of person where, because he himself has been misjudged and has been called toxic and terrible things, he will automatically think, oh, maybe there's more to the story. Like, oh, maybe they're just misjudging this person. He's been down that road himself. So I think that tweet even was, look, a little bit was referring to that, but there's a reason he didn't just use the name there. So I vouch for this one person over the others. So, and then the last quick thing to say is this. So in that scenario where it has in no way been proven this is his best friend or some super duper party, he was in one video for 5 seconds, then he made a follow-up tweet and liked some tweets. That in no context, in a reasonable, like actual attempt to understand what's going on, would imply he is complicit in any crimes or former actions of that individual. That would be a totally unreasonable standard to hold someone to. Now, certainly you could say if you knew about those things, it's like implicated of like, maybe you don't think it's as bad. You could have that discussion, but I think there's a lot, essentially there's a lot of like fog and stuff that people lost their way on this one big time. I feel like this is one of those ones where it was thrown up there and people could just read anything they wanted and project anything they wanted into it. And there wasn't any interesting convos as a result.
Sure, but I think that's the core problem is like, if that's the, you know, if people can, if there's so many different interpretations of this, then Carlos shouldn't be putting up this content as part of his duty as basically the face of G2, right? Because there's too much ambiguity, effectively.
Let me ask you a quick question. If anyone in this call was in Vegas and Mike Tyson's there, you take a picture of him if he wants one?
If he wants one?
If you want one.
Oh, I wouldn't want one. So no, would be the
Richard, would you take a picture of Mike Tyson?
You absolutely know I would, and you also know that I think his criminal conviction is one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in American history.
You get the point of what Monty's saying.
I know what he's saying. He is a convicted rapist, yes.
So I just don't think it's that simple, Monty. I know what you mean, but I think that's another case of where people love to go. Once they've seen that a line's established after the fact, they go, how could anyone ever step over that line? You obviously knew what you were doing. Like, I think this started with Carlos being edgy with a tweet, and then it spiraled, and then his response to he didn't want to be controlled and didn't want to pay, I think it just, everything got worse from every side, and it just expanded out into something crazy.
Lauren, when you look at this from the agency perspective, and like, what was your reaction to first seeing this put out there? Because again, like, I had to see, you guys all knew who this person was. Like, I was like, well, what is this? Like, why is this a big deal? And I had to go through that process. But what was your take on the initial reaction and then the Carlos's follow up?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. I think when I first look at this, the first thing I think is really about like the cost benefit analysis of posting something like this, like, and kind of interrogating like what is the reason and what is the mindset for posting content with someone who is so incredibly radioactive, because it's one thing for them to be friends offline and to have a relationship one-on-one, not saying it's right or wrong or anything other than that. It's just like that exists, and then there's a choice to publicize that relationship, and that's where it falls apart for me. Like, I just generally feel like very, very perplexed by making the decision to like publicly declare any sort of association with someone like Andrew Tate. You know, I tweeted yesterday something basically to the effect of like, if I went to a restaurant and I ran into the Tate brothers, I would be embarrassed that I chose the same place. So like the idea.
Right. Listen, I'm sure their views on food don't have to comply with misogyny. They might just like really nice food as well.
No, on like their views being utterly vile, like they're also just so embarrassing. Not to
be seen in the same place.
Yes, it's
right.
Like so goofy and so embarrassing. And to your point about like you don't know who you're vouching for, I'm like, how are so many people choosing to die on the hill of this particular man? Like it doesn't.
Lost boys.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
By the way, as a quick aside, do you want to know something funny? Because this will come up later in the episode. Do you know, within the same week, Carlos posted a different picture and there was no furore. Do you know who it was with? It was with people who actually are like, there's some sorts of like businessmen from the Middle East who in theory it's implicated would be involved with much, much worse things than Andrew Tate. But I will say, I noticed no one in esports said, get them out of esports. Don't, how dare you? You're so, and weirdly, that one never came up. That's why I just say, if we're going to make it like there's these hard and fast lines, well, then they're hard and fast lines. They can't just be moved as we choose. Like, we're going to have the line. I'm with you guys. If you want the line, make the line. But let's hold the line. Let's not let people walk over because they're a bit richer, you know?
Yeah, I think we'll get into that, and like that is like
just a teaser.
Yeah, a lot of the issue that we're going to discuss here, because I think what was frustrating for me about this is not minimizing what was happening here, but also the fact that we need to really deal with the treatment of women as it is in the esports industry, and we can actually hopefully affect some of these changes, or help affect some of these changes by shining the light on them. But by putting these little distractions of the, internet moron of the week, and having a crucifixion of this guy who may or may not deserve it, sounds like he probably does, but it distracts from actually making systemic changes that are necessary.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.